Hi, I'm Greg Brahe, and I'm an atheist. Intellectual honesty can be a scary thing. It means setting aside your pride, putting your most cherished beliefs on the line, and examining them with honest and open inquiry, looking at them from dissenting viewpoints and considering all of the evidence and all the options and admitting a possibility that you might be wrong. That's so scary, in fact, that people have cloistered themselves away. They've locked out dissenting opinions, shunned them, or worse, through almost all of human history. But the New Covenant Group is different. Join us Sundays at 6 o'clock for Inspiring Honesty, authentic inquiry between a believer and a non-believer on the questions that really matter.
I like the way that Greg is engaged. He's enthusiastic about this in a very real way, which is excellent. I think he's ready to deal with the issues, bring out what he perceives, and to be honest with you, I'm more than excited and ready to respond.
When I was first asked to be on the show, I have to be honest, it was a little daunting. I've never seen, and as far as I'm aware, there's never been an atheist in a hosting position on a regular show through a Christian broadcast. That's a lot of pressure. I need to really represent my side well, but I'm excited. I think that this is going to be a fantastic opportunity for some important conversations that never would have happened if the Christians stayed with the Christians and the atheists stayed with the atheists, and the theists stayed with the theists, and the Muslims stayed with the Muslims. The conversations need to be addressed from multiple angles.
Whatever there is to risk through genuine dialogue, it probably isn't worth having.
In polite society, there have always been things that are considered taboo. A person's faith is beyond question. It's beyond challenge. It's sacred. Well, I disagree. And the New Covenant Group has invited me to be part of their show where, for the first time ever, an atheist, myself, can sit down with a believer and have real conversations about the subjects that matter, subjects that have always been off limits before. Hi, welcome to Inspiring Honesty. I'm Greg Brahe, and I'm your host, and I'm an atheist. Today is going to be, I think it's our 6th show that we're doing. It's really developed of its own right, with conversations between myself and Bob Greaves, talking about the questions that matter and going in depth about some of the more philosophical sides of theology and of even the nature of knowledge and how we can know. This will be the last consecutive week, at least, that I'll have Bob on the show with me. So this week and next week, I'll be joined by a new guest host. His name is Alan Darley, and we will hopefully have a fantastic conversation. He's coming in directly from England, so will be a bit of a time difference. Hopefully he can handle that okay. For him, he'll be broadcasting at midnight. But this one, I wanted to make sure that the conversations that we've had in the last 5 weeks and through this one sort of get an opportunity for a capstone. We've talked about a lot, and I don't want to go in with too much laid out ahead of time to sort of I'm sorry, I'm having trouble articulating this. I don't want to plan the conversation too much, because I just want to make sure that if there's any additional questions that the viewers had for myself or for Bob, or if Bob had for me, we can get those out on the table here and now, and hopefully leave with all of us having a little bit more understanding of one another and understanding of the concepts we've been talking about. However, before I introduce Bob, I did want to say I've been looking through his blog lately, and the one thing that I've been struck by is his most recent blog post. I don't know if anybody's had the opportunity to check out Bob's blog yet. It is related, I believe, to his show, or at least he's mentioned his show on it. It is unconventionalpastor.blogspot.com, and he has his most recent blog talks about how we change how someone else thinks. And that, I think, sort of, I want to be the underlying theme to today's show, because that's what we've been talking about intrinsically through everything. Is we're having these discussions, we're having these conversations about the nature of reality, but the main question here is, have we accomplished anything, and can we accomplish anything? Is it possible for anybody to lay out their beliefs, their arguments, their concepts of what is true, and make that occur across, or make that clear to somebody else, so that we can have a mutual understanding of one another and potentially actually come in together? Bob makes the point that the best, and I'll quote it here, because I think that makes it does a bit more justice. If I can find that line now. He says, how another person thinks is their responsibility, and how they dismiss or reconsider what I have to say is their responsibility. He goes on to say, this might create in you some dissonance, and that is, I think that's the main question that we have to look at, is even if these conversations are an exercise in futility in the immediate moment, if there's no way that we can just simply explain our beliefs and have everybody go, oh, that makes sense, is that still a futile goal? Are we going into the effort knowing that nothing is going to change? Or is our hope that in the end somebody will have something to think about? And I guess that's always been my goal. I don't know what I can do, but as I've said in the past, my goal with this show is to convert you. And the only way that I can do that is by inspiring you to think about what you already believe and to come through that process on your own. Hopefully our conversations have helped with that. And with that, I wanted to bring Bob into the show. Bob, how are you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I've been quite ill this last week. A bit of flu or cold going around the school, and I happened to catch this round. And I've been resting this weekend. My eyes are blurry. I know there's a camera there, but hey, I'm here. And
Well,
let's
thank you
hope
for
that.
that. This is a trooper right here. I'm sorry to hear that, and I'm glad that we communicate through Skype and not face to face in some of these situations, because I don't
No,
want
yeah,
you.
right.
But
I'll try not to breathe on the camera.
if you could
Yeah,
do that, I think the viewers would appreciate it.
sure.
Don't want to get a
Yeah,
computer virus.
yeah.
Sorry for the pun. So, Bob, I guess I just wanted to say thank you right away before we go on to anything else. Thank you for the discussions that we've had over the last several weeks, and for what you've done in opening my understanding of ways that people can think about this subject. Your name, or the name that you go by for your show, is such a true name, the Unconventional Pastor. You have truly thrown me for a loop on many things, and phrased things in ways I've never heard them phrased before, and had me need to reconsider ideas of my own. And I wanted to thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome. And I'll tell you what, a big reason of why I became as unconventional as I am is not because I tried to be, but, I work in a very academic environment, and I'm around people who are atheists, and I have honest discussions with them. And I'd have to say that listening to people who are well educated, who know what they're talking about, has forced me to reconsider how I understand things. And I find that although I am definitely a believer, I have found that many of the objections that people of faith receive from people who don't have faith are, in my opinion, well founded, but I would, of course, argue they go too far. And it's forced me, though, to, well, okay, uh, there's a problem they're talking about, and I have to see that's a real problem. So, what do I do with that? And I think that I've had to struggle with that and think about it, and it's led me to finally realize that some of the things that I used to believe, I mean, when I went to Bob Jones University, I came out of there quite a fundamentalist, and honesty required of me to abandon a great number of directions, and so there's a sense in which. Uh, I come to you already sort of prepared with some of the things that you might have to say, and that's sort of unfair because if you haven't run into someone like me, it's like the very first time. And so
Well,
but
I think that's a credit to you, though. That I've run into quite a few people, and I've had quite a few conversations. I don't have the experience that you do, but for somebody of my cohort, I'd say that there's probably been a bit more um, experience and conversations on this subject than most people of my age have had without actually being in the clergy. So um, the fact that you're the first of you that I've run into is saying something. It, that yeah, you are certainly unique, and we've really
mm,
appreciated your perspective on the show and the way that you can bring things to the table that are completely different from what I've seen. It's been marvelous opportunity, and I've really appreciated everything that you've said and you've done. Um, and I don't. Is there anything
well,
else
thank you.
that you wanted to say before we? Uh, I guess before we
Yeah,
have a hiatus, I'm sure you're going to be back. I'm absolutely going to have you back. But
yeah.
it's
I
anything
would
you feel like we haven't
just
spent enough time on.
yeah, we've talked about a number of things, and even just the blog of mine that you mentioned before. You know, I do think that of course, different from you, I would say that my goal isn't really to convert anyone. My goal is to be understood, to express possibilities. Now, I certainly have my own ideas and my own beliefs, and in some cases, they're really just things I've settled into. Other things I feel more certain of, but at the same time, I think that there's a great deal to be gained by the discussion that we have had. That it will, if people will be honest with some of the problems they hear, they're going to have to, at some point, say, "Well, huh." And I think that for some people, that could actually threaten their faith. And the truth is, I don't want a faith that can't face the possible threats. I don't want one like that. So. Um, I would hope that regardless of whether a person's able to make this coherent or not, and of course, being a person who believes in the love of God, I think God can handle the fact that some people, in honesty, cannot make sense of some things because of where they're at or what they've gone through or the way they're approaching it, and it's not necessarily something that is to their discredit.
That I don't know. I think that that's an interesting way to look at it, but I just I don't know. The idea of a faith that can't hold up to scrutiny, I will absolutely agree with you that I don't think that that's um, a worthy faith, if nothing else. There's plenty of people who do shy away from questions and who are too afraid of offense to move into a place where they could even. I don't know how to articulate that. It's if you're in a situation where you can't risk what you already believe, if it's so dear to you, so sacred, then or that you're afraid to put it on the altar, what what can you do? I mean, how is that a faith that you can hold on to?
Uh, well, I suppose in some ways I perceive the actual way I became what I would call an agnostic theist was through my study of mathematics. I don't know if I ever talked to you about that, did I?
No, no, I don't think you did.
Well, I used to do calculus and all geometry and stuff like that, and I was pretty good at math and loved it. And studied statistics, and they're just stuff I found fascinating. Perhaps taking after my mom and dad, but I began taking a look at multidimensional geometry, and I began to realize that everything that occurs in greater dimensions and intersects cannot be discerned from lower dimensions. Cannot be. For example, if you have a sheet of paper, and this is really just a two-dimensional object in a sense. And let's pretend the piece of paper doesn't know anything about the three-dimensional world, and there's a dot on that piece of paper. The dot on that piece of paper is indistinguishable from a dot that is just a dot, or a line that's actually from a three-dimensional plane that is intersecting the paper and at that dot. Because that two-dimensional world knows nothing of the three-dimensional world, the dots are indistinguishable, and yet they are uniquely different. And by studying the geometry of, okay, what about when a four-dimensional object intersects with a three-dimensional object? Or how about a 10-dimensional object intersecting with a three-dimensional object? There would be within the three dimensions an equivalent object that would be indistinguishable. And so from this, I got to the point that in studying string theory and the concept of that we live in a multidimensional universe, that if there is a God and if he created this universe, he would have to be someone living outside of all of those dimensions. And therefore, anything that he did that in any manner interacted with what's going on in just our three dimensions plus time would have to be identical to anything that could naturally happen within those three dimensions plus time all by itself and be indistinguishable. And therefore, the proof of God is something that is unavailable to us from the standpoint of our three dimensions plus time. And from that, I came to the point that the question is fruitless, because although there may be proof, it's not available to me because I'm a three-dimensional creature who lives in time, and I don't have access to the multiple dimensions that are potential in the world of physics to really look at the universe and to observe the things that would actually be there multidimensionally. I can calculate that the possibility is that they are there, but all I can find is the three-dimensional equivalent of that residual. And so I came to the mathematical conclusion that it would be impossible to have proof of a greater dimension from within a smaller dimension. It's just mathematically impossible. And so that turned me into an agnostic. Now, as an agnostic, I also believe, because it doesn't prove that it isn't true. So I also became very comfortable with the faith that I can't prove, but I do in my life. I sense the love of God in my life. I sense His presence with me. I've been that way since I was 6 years old, and it is for me in a very authentic and a very nurturing experience, and it leaves me a believer, but also very comfortable with the fact that I can't compel this upon anybody, and I've lost the desire to do so.
That might be the most compelling part of it. That's what's odd. I struggle sometimes with my personal campaign to shake the faith of other people. Is that the right thing to do? Is it the moral thing to do? And I do tend
That's
to
a
look
worthy
at
question, even if you decide you should continue.
Thank you. Uh, I I look at what you discussed, and I agree that an unquestioned faith is not a faith that is, I think, worthy of. Or it's not intellectually honest. It's something that can be held without questions. And I believe it was Carl Sagan who said that which can be. I'm sorry, I think actually it might have been Christopher Hitchens, but that which can be asserted without evidence. Sorry, we got a viewer comment there. That which can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. And
I
that's
disagree, but it certainly can't be compelled. Yeah.
and that's
However, I would say this: anything that is asserted by faith that can be proven to have evidence that it isn't so has to be dismissed. I mean, when people have this belief that, for example, that the world is flat, and there was a long time when even some Christians thought that this was a biblical notion. Uh, I'm sorry, you're going to have to come to terms with. We've been able to actually prove the Earth is a sphere. It is. And so I think that there are many aspects of faith that are a part of some actually ancient naive assumptions, and they have to go.
That's I think my primary goal. People have asked me why I fight this fight that I do, why I work so hard to shake people's faith, and I think that um, uh, the point you just made, that if there is something that somebody holds in faith that is not consistent with reality, that's something that needs to be let go. And I know I've said in the past that I believe all faith is dangerous. That's it's true because it's currently true. Unfortunately, that your faith, I can't come up with any way that a direct application of your agnostic theism without an assertive or a compelling force, it could be dangerous to anybody. The only argument that I make, or the only reason that I say it's dangerous, is because we rely on the argument from faith, when we say I believe because I believe, it allows the door to be open for anybody to use that argument for anything and to start making assumptions that it is compelling.
And we can get silly, real silly. But also, the truth is, once I begin to believe that my faith can in any manner be compelling, I've actually violated the meaning of faith. If it were compelling, then it's not really faith; it's science. And
Thank you. Can I quote that? Sorry.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I could even get, and although I use the world as flat as an example, I could give you an example farther or closer to home. There are people who believe that the scripture is absolutely inerrant. Now, personally, I don't think you even have to try to look into the scripture to find some of the philosophical conundrums to argue against that. I think if a person studies linguistics, they will discover that language possesses no capacity for that. All words possess a signifying sense of meaning that crosses over a larger domain of possible usage. And as a result, words are just not capable of that sort of precision. They're not. There's no way you can actually say something that is absolutely perfect in representing reality other than the language of math. So language doesn't even possess that ability, just from the standpoint of linguistics. So therefore, I see language communicates, but it does not. It does not ever get that precise.
My brother-in-law, he's a philosopher. Well, I'm sorry, my future brother-in-law. They're engaged at the moment. He works in computer science, which does have rather absolute language, but he is part of he nearly has a doctorate in philosophy. I'd love to have him on the show at some point. We'll see if I can convince him to. He's another one that'd be broadcasting from the UK. So, but that is a point that he came to. He's also an atheist, but his understanding of philosophy is that the questions that we ask, the conversations that we have, are only possible because of the ambiguities in language. That
is true. Yeah,
if we were fully understanding one another, then these questions wouldn't even be on the table because we'd understand already.
Which is another reason why my faith also not only became what I call agnostic theism. That is, I know that I can't prove this, and I also know that there's no proof. And I can't know it with certainty. It doesn't mean it's not true. But it also means that my faith is not in the concepts themselves, but rather in the authenticity of the events. For example, my belief in God is that he's a person. a personality, an existence, an entity. But those are words I just used to kind of narrow in what I'm talking about. Who he actually is, and I say he only because we just don't in our English language
Linguistic
speak of God
conventions.
as it, but uh, whoever he is who he is, and the words that I use to discuss him are just tools that I use to be able to reduce reality into organizable objects that I can talk about. And the moment I begin to confuse the signifying objects that I or the signifiers that I use for these objects as if they're one and the same as the object, I'm actually it's as silly as telling you I need a hammer and you bring me a piece of paper with the word hammer on it. That's not a hammer. And if you bring me a hammer and I need the hammer to pound something in, it doesn't really matter what you call it. The tool can do the job I need done, no matter what we call it. So when it comes to the concept of words, there's a quality to words. There's a quality to the brain's ability to even deal with words. I think it's very useful. But the moment we begin to think that we're somehow dealing with reality rather than dealing with our semiotic reduction of reality is the moment we've taken ourselves too seriously. That's my philosophy on that.
I,
And that may be a little hard for some people to kind of grasp. And if it is, then, forget about it. It doesn't matter.
well, no, I really think that's a fantastic point. That it's impossible to convey my absolute meaning using language uh, without losing some of that. Language has an inherent ambiguity, and everybody has a different concept. Even if we want to make it a very clear concept, when I say purple, um, how do I know that the color that I am looking at when I see purple looks to me the same as it looks to you? As long as you and I can both see the same object and say it's purple, you could be seeing it in the way that I see green. As long as it's consistent in your vision, then it's consistent and we can continue to communicate about that object. But the concept of color is an individual interpretive understanding of color. My dad is colorblind.
Perhaps
He
also
can't
maybe
see color.
bioneurological too, in the way the cones and other aspects of the eye work. By the way, I don't know if you know that. Well, you're being a biologist, you might even really know this. That there are other animals other than human beings that have eyes. And I remember reading once about an experiment with bees, where they would put food on a checkerboard on red squares, but the yellow squares would be squares where the bees would get like a little shock. And what they did is they shifted the colors to see, after they trained the bees to find the food on the red squares, until they found how far toward orange can they get before the bees no longer assume it's red. And they did discover that the point at which the bee perceives it as no longer red is a different point at which human beings would see it as red. What's going on there? I don't really know, but we do know this, that the differentiation of colors does seem to be species oriented and is really a function of our neurology. So that the colors we see are really wavelengths that are converted and synthesized into a visual experience for us. And what are they in actuality? Nothing other than vibrations of energy.
Well, and color is another fantastic representation when we talk about the spectrum that humans are capable of seeing. Isn't exactly the same. Bees are a fantastic example. They can see the ultraviolet spectrum.
Right.
That's something that humans simply are not capable of seeing. So I've seen representations of what a flower looks like to a bee, but that's imagined. We can't see what a flower looks like to a bee. It's impossible, given our ocular structure, to see what it looks like to a bee. They see colors that we don't see. That's one of the restrictions, again, not only of language but of human perception.
Yes.
I saw somebody talking about how the human imagination is infinite, and the only thing I could think was, really, imagine a new color. It's not
Fuchsia?
possible. Yeah, I mean, we're restricted to that which we can perceive, and I think that it plays in with your multidimensional geometry idea as well, that the plane in which we exist includes that visual spectrum of color. There's ways that we can detect other spectrums of color, but not change it. And it's just
Right.
a very intriguing concept that there might that not only there might be, but there are so many other colors. We see less than 10% of the spectrum that is electromagnetic radiation. We call it the visual um, light,
Right.
but X-rays, microwaves, these are all
And we have
light.
no idea what the experience of those colors would be when they're blended either. I mean, our complex colors are a blend of different colors, and we have no idea what those blends would be like. When it comes to when you see a picture of a flower the way a bee would see it, what they usually do is they've determined the range of light at the bottom and the top that a bee can see. They take a photograph using a device that can also see within that range, and then they shift everything in that range to within the range of human vision, and then they print that photograph. And I suppose that's perhaps similar. I don't know, but
It's a facsimile of sorts, but it's still
it
not. We're not seeing what bees see, and we're
no.
not
And
perceiving what. It's such a fascinating concept to me that it's not possible for us to imagine things outside of our scope, and that it leads me back to your assessment. I couldn't agree with you more about the multidimensional perception and the restrictions of the human mind and the human body, the human senses, to perceive things outside of that which it's capable of perceiving by definition. And when we talk about the agnosticism being the only intellectually honest position, in my opinion, and it would seem in yours, that there are plenty of Gnostics out there who believe to know for certain in one way or another, and beyond that, the concept of restrictions and limited perception means that not only is it likely that there's so much more out there that we're not capable of detecting, but it's essentially impossible for that to not be true.
oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
Uh,
How absurd. I mean, we can build devices that can detect things we biologically can't. So we know that they are there. I mean, we build
the only
micron
question
microscopes.
that when we talk about being able to build devices that can detect things that we cannot, have you ever considered the possibility that such a device might be developed to detect a god?
Yes. Yeah. I call it a soul. I no. If could we ever develop such a thing? I think that the multidimensionality thing means that if we ever could develop such a machine, we could never determine whether that machine we developed merely only contained the aspects of the residual of our dimensions or actually fills into the other dimension. We could never know. We couldn't determine that. It would really probably require, who knows what will happen 10,000 years from now? We might discover that we are contacted by some other intelligent being that, by their very nature, are five-dimensional creatures, and they deal with our three dimensions much the same way we can write on a piece of paper. Who knows what could happen and how the universe has come about. That's just a fascinating idea to me. And it's like Carl Sagan said, something when he's considering some of these possibilities, that either way, the possibility that I think the way he put it was the possibility that there are others out there is just profound, and the possibility that we're the only ones. Either way, this is profound. It's just amazing stuff, and so I just find myself kind of in awe at the unsearchableness of reality. It's just beyond us.
Well, you brought up
But it's an awful.
statistics earlier, which I think plays a huge role in this question as well. Is when you talk about the possibilities that there might be other or more intelligent life. Carl Sagan was pretty well convinced that there has to be more intelligent life somewhere out there in the universe, given the fact that it happened at least once here, and on an infinite scale. the likelihood that something can happen only once is zero by nearly all. I mean, if it can happen an infinite number of tries, it will happen, and it will happen an infinite number of times.
I think he even worked out the probability, didn't he? Was something like around he thought there was a possibility that in the entire universe there'd be 600 likely places. I seem to remember that number.
I'm not familiar, but that would
Yeah.
not surprise me. There's is it Drake's postulate, I believe, where he
I don't remember.
comes along that as
I
well.
remember watching those Carl Sagan specials on PBS and on Nova that just were awesome. Fellow was totally fascinating.
So this is a question that I guess this has all been coming around to, in my mind at least, is these are all possibilities. And again, using statistics, they're likely possibilities. There's plenty of reason and room for argument to say that not only is there possibly other intelligent life, not only is there possibly other dimensions, but there's probably other intelligent life in other dimensions. Who's to say that this intelligent life is not what we would perceive as a god? I forget who said it, but that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And as you brought up, a 5-dimensional being may have the ability to write in 3 dimensions the way that we write with a pen and paper. So it's an intriguing concept, and what it all boils down to on the scale of agnosticism is that we know that these things are possible and that some may even be likely, but is it intellectually honest to make any assumptions as to what they are?
Without good reason, I mean, if you're just gonna make stuff up, I suppose that's okay if you're gonna write fiction. I mean, fiction writers. I love the Harry Potter series. I think it's awesome. J.K. Rowling has an amazing imagination, and I'm sure she knows these things aren't real. But her imagination goes there, and but it's not like it's about ready to become her actual real faith. I suppose that actual viable religion probably grows out of the near-death experience and the hallucinatory experiences of the mind, leading us to the concept and the possibility that there's something else that I'm conscious of in these altered states that seems real. And I do think that we, just as some people seem to inexplicably have, sense things. We don't know why. We can't explain it with certainty. But there have been countless stories of people who, when their spouse is injured, they're immediately agitated, even though they're nowhere near them, and then they begin inquiring and finding out what's going on here. I don't know, but things like this happen that. Perhaps some of us have had an opportunity to open up to a dimension, and we have experienced the presence of God. And our theology, I claim all theology is man-made, and I don't see any problem with that as long as we recognize it's just man-made, is this attempt to articulate an authentic experience that is not clear as to exactly what it is, but it is, once you've had that experience, undeniable that you've had the experience.
I wouldn't know. I've not had that experience, so I can't say that I would know. I mean, I will be happy to make, and I have made in the past arguments that I know you recognize, that perception is not necessarily reality, that there's psychological explanations, physiological explanations, hypoxia, all kinds of different things that can explain sensations of, say, out-of-body experiences related to, say, the naturally occurring chemical in our brain, DMT.
Right.
There's plenty of other
These are not compelling in and of themselves. They are not. The mere fact that the brain is even capable of such hallucinations is interesting.
It is. And we have some viewer commenting. It looks like somebody from my camp here. This is the first time I think I've had this. Viewer commented, "How can any faith be worthy? Will it not always be open to question, if not ridiculed? Faith cannot be proven, can it?" Sorry, there's a couple more. I'm going to
Yeah.
read them off here just to get through all of them. "Give me one example of provable faith. The doctrines of faith are no less than illusion and no more than delusion. The language of nonsense." Agree or disagree, Bob?
Well, I agree and disagree. There is no provable faith. I mean, that's an oxymoron. And to look for it is to, I would say, be dishonestly looking for that which is by definition an oxymoron. There are no real contradictions in reality, just conundrums we don't understand. But in terms of state the first one again, the first question there, the first comment.
How can any faith be worthy? Will it not always be open to question, if not ridiculed?
I hope that it's always open to question, and I don't think there's anything. I mean, there's no reason to be unkind to each other unnecessarily. But if people are going to make assertions, I think they have to be open to being ridiculed. Absolutely, sure. It doesn't, I mean, think about it. We're saying things that are uncompelling. Well, sorry, that's the way it goes. It's uncompelling, and if somebody finds that absurd, they do, and I think they need to be free to say so. And if I can't deal with it, that's just too damn bad. So I just don't see that as a problem, personally.
It's interesting how much you and I do agree on with, and again, very unconventional. But
by the way, isn't that what we said in our opening comments, the very first show? I think I told you, I said, I think you'll discover that you and I will agree on far more than you might think.
Well, it was you in one of our online conversations today. What didn't you say? You are 99.9% atheist.
Yeah, because there's only one God I believe in, of all of them, I guess. But,
yeah, that's
it was just being funny.
Even K. Roberts said, "When you understand the reason that you've rejected all other gods, you'll understand the reason that I've rejected yours as well."
Yeah.
And there's another viewer had written in here. This isn't a bit lengthier, so I'm going to try to do it justice. It always amazes me that atheists usually base their unbelief in God as creator on the evidence of evil in creation. Yet they don't even consider the existence of Satan, the adversary, the evil one. In his wisdom, God created the evil one to introduce man to evil and all its misery and eventually death. Then he puts man before the simple choice. Choose between life and death. This revelation of evil... Sorry, my eyes are playing tricks on me. This revelation of evil will go on to inspire man to choose life. Ironically, in choosing not to accept life, atheists prove the existence of evil. They declare themselves gods who condemn themselves, just like Satan. The root of this is the bitterness of unforgiveness as a result of that, or of the hurt that followed, often unimaginable trauma caused by Satan himself. Satan refuses forgiveness, but there is still hope for atheists. I love atheists. And mind you, they did cite a few scriptures in there as well. I did not go through them, but it was Deuteronomy 30, 11 through 19, and Psalms 109, 1 through 20, in case anybody wanted to reference those. I guess that's one as the atheist on the show here. I'm going to take that one quick. That's not why I'm an atheist. And I think that's what I was really trying to get at with this show. And I should clarify, we're not absolutely sure that Bob won't be able to join us next week. I'm priming the audience to be prepared for that. But we'd really like it if Bob can join me and Alan as well. So the conversations that we're having are not the end, but I wanted to make sure that we have a capstone to the conversations that we've had between the two of us before moving on. The one that I think we were really driving at today, and the point that I'm hoping to bring home, is that Bob and I agree on so much about agnosticism and the nature of knowledge, how things can be known, what faith means. The only difference, truly, is that when it comes to the final question, is there a God? Oh, there's really a couple questions. Is there a God, and what is that God like? Um, Bob takes the position and that it's the position from faith that yes, there is a God,
Yep.
and goes based on some personal experiences, subjective experiences that I have not had, and therefore I take the opposite position. I'm not compelled to believe that there is no God because of the evil in creation, or anything about harm or ungoodness. I will say that I'm compelled to believe that there are not certain definitions of God. If you give me a definition, I can tell you whether I'm Gnostic or agnostic on that particular God. Um, but when we talk about this, it all comes down to the leap of faith. As an atheist, I'm simply not capable. I have not had the subjective personal experiences to compel me to say I believe in a God. I say that
Right.
there's so much that we don't know that I don't rule out the possibility that there is one, but there's so many things that argument could be applied to. I don't rule out the possibility that there are unicorns either, but I don't
Well,
believe that they exist.
you'd also have to deal with the possibilities of things such as, so if there is this possibility, uh, when is he going to get around to me? You know,
That's true.
I
People ask me
wonder
what
that.
changed my opinion, um, that make me into a believer, and I'll tell you what, that's a question that is a fantastic one. I think everybody should ask themselves that: is if you believe that there's a God, is there anything that could change your mind? Um, but the opposite is true. If you don't believe in God, from myself, is there anything that changed my mind? And I can tell you there's hundreds of things. There's an infinite number of answers to that question. There's plenty of ways I could be compelled to believe that there is a God, and none of those have ever happened to me.
Yeah.
But from the position of theists, many of them specifically, that say that there is no way that they could be convinced that there isn't one. And possibly that comes
Yeah.
down to the subjective experiences that they've had, but I don't know.
Well, one thing, once you've had, I mean, once you've had an experience, it becomes difficult to deny that you've had the experience, although it may not be difficult to explain it differently. You can no. I mean, suppose you're walking down the street, and you suddenly have this sensation that there's someone behind you, and you turn around, and sure enough, there's this huge hulky person, and you're frightened for a moment, but only to realize it's just some large person. And when they finally come into view, they look rather harmless, and they walk right past you, and for a moment there, you were scared. Now, you may now know there was nothing to be scared of, but you will never be able to believe that you weren't for a moment frightened. The experience remains an authentic experience. And I think that for people of faith who have, for whatever reasons, and I don't even know that I understand it, have had that experience of reaching out and of knowing the presence of God. I'm a big I preach strongly when I do preach, and I don't preach that often, on the concept that Christianity is primarily the phenomenon of the indwelling Christ, someone who actually lives deep within us. If I were to put it in modern psychological terms, deep within our subconscious, our subconscious mind. There's this presence, and it's kind of like the elephant in the room. Even if you don't know any language, you can't deny there's this elephant in the room. Now, this is an experience. I think that it is only honest to recognize there could be alternative explanations for this experience. But you
That doesn't
can't
deny the
ever get to the
experience.
point where you deny you have this experience. I can't get to the point where I can. I suppose maybe something could one day show me that there's this psychological explanation that really, really makes sense. I suppose that's a possibility, but I could never get to the point where I don't feel that I live loved. I can't do that. it is for me such an authentic experience that I sense the love and the presence of God, not only about me, but about all. I sense Him about you. And it's kind of like, I don't know, maybe some people think they see auras or whatever. I don't know. I don't know how to explain it,
Well, and that's
but
a fantastic point, though. And I'm sorry, we're running out of time again. We always do. I wish we had a 10-hour show, but we have about 3 minutes left. And I wanted to make the point that you're absolutely right, that experience is authentic from your own perception. But that same argument can be made for those who experience auras or faith healing or so many different things. Michael Shermer wrote a book. I think had pulled it out. It is Why People Believe Weird Things. Now, this one I'm rather excited about. This is not the copy I got signed. I saw him do a presentation about this in person right here in my hometown. Talked with him.
awesome.
He's a very intriguing man. He's a neurobiologist, and he wrote this book, but it boils down to confirmation bias, really. It goes through all kinds of things in here about what science is and what the different weird things are. And it's not faith alone. Faith is one of the weird things that he talks about, but any superstition. When I was a kid, I was terrified that if I ever did anything wrong, I had learned that you leave DNA basically everywhere that you go. So I was absolutely convinced that my parents had the ability to discover anything that I did wrong ever with simple DNA testing. And that was a weird thing that I believed.
Maybe that's why you're such a good guy.
It must be. And there's a fantastic – actually, the conversation I'm hoping to have with Alan next week to prime the audience. If you have any questions, let's get this in ahead of time. Hoping to talk a bit about morality next week.
Yeah. How come atheists don't kill everybody? Yeah.
That is a fantastic question. And, maybe that's the question we should just end the show on tonight. Why don't atheists kill people?
Because they don't want to.
Right. Is that it, though? And the other question, the flip side of that, is why do atheists do anything good? Is it possible for an atheist to do anything good without the concept of God? Or is that which an atheist does better? And these hypothetical, that which an atheist does better than that which a theist does, because there is no promise of eternal reward or punishment if not done. It's not being compelled through fear or reward, but simply through compassion.
I think it's sometimes the case that is true.
So these are all the topics that I'd love to get into more. Hopefully next week we can figure out how you can join us as well, Bob, and we should have a fantastic conversation. Alan is a teacher of philosophy, religious studies, and sociology. So very educated, very articulate man, and very, very strongly theist. We should have a great conversation. Thank you for joining us this week. Thank you for joining me this week, Bob, and for everything that you've done. Hope to have you on again next week with Alan and myself.
Let's see how it goes.
You have a wonderful day, and thank you again. Thank you to all the viewers for joining us, and tune in again next week for Inspiring Honesty. You have a great day.